tend to overcomplicate recruiting. It's actually pretty simple. Resumes, they're known to be a poor predictor of success.
How do I get beyond the resume? Waiting every second is painful.
They need to hire slow, fire fast. And I think it's one of the biggest lies ever been told.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. Most people in recruiting are trying to fill a job. Today's guest has spent 20 plus years trying to fix the whole system. Adam Gellert is the founder and CEO of Hippo, a hiring marketplace that connects top employers with prime candidates through mutual interest, effectively a dating app for professional connections, which we have to dig into, that says goodbye to traditional resumes. He's also the founder and recruitment advisor at the Linkist Group, a boutique recruiting firm that he built to serve startups and SMBs. Today, we're going to talk about hiring, recruiting, all the ways it actually works, the way it fails, and how founders can be better at it. Adam, beyond having a great name, welcome to Entrepreneurial Excellence.
Thank you so much, Adam, number one, for having me. You have quite an impressive resume, if I can say that. So I'm excited to be here, and I hate resumes. So
I was going to say, but resumes don't matter, right, Adam? Like, does my resume matter?
it doesn't at all. No. In fact, like resumes are a really poor predictor of success, and they're just relied on way too heavily for on the company side. So, but you do have an impressive portfolio, I would say.
I'll take it. We definitely want to talk about why resumes suck and how do you get around that, because there's a reason I assume why people, I don't want to go too deep in this just yet, but since we're talking about it, there's a reason why people use resumes, right? And why people look at there certain metrics people look at. They want to look at hiring managers. Everyone's busy, right? I assume everyone's busy. Lives are crazy. You need something to look at to say, this person looks like they should be a good hire or employee for my company. So you look at things like your resume, you look at where did someone go to school is a signal people use a lot to decide if someone's going to be good in their role. All these things. Why are those bad predictors of success? And what do you look at instead? Like, how do you get past that without having to spend hundreds of more hours on every hire?
Yeah, so resumes are just a comfort zone, right? For most hiring managers, it's what they know.
It's a comfort zone because they know it. Is it a comfort zone because it's a shortcut? Is it, or is it like CYA, cover my butt, basically, to protect myself? Say, well, they had a great resume, so how could I make a mistake?
It's mostly a cover my butt. People don't like getting something wrong, and hiring. Most people talk to, they'll tell you at some point in their career they've made a mistake. Hiring someone, right? And so, hiring is really, and recruiting in general is really about getting the best person possible for the job in the shortest amount of time for the lowest cost. People help businesses move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Businesses are created to make money and drive business opportunity, right? So the resume is mostly a comfort thing for people that don't hire 24/7 like typical recruiters do, where it's mostly the, how do I check these boxes? This is what I understand within these like four sides of a piece of paper or LinkedIn right now, right? They kind of rely on past experience, what they might have bias or unconscious bias of what's worked or hasn't worked in the past to make former decisions. But resume is just like resume, right? Nobody wants to resume what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's about, what can I do next? What what is the Adam of the future, in your case? And how do you identify if you're going to be the best person? Like you would look for potential in anyone, in a partner, in a sports team that you join, in a house that you buy, right? It's all about future potential.
But how do you, as an employer and hirer, and if you're someone who either hasn't hired a lot or you're only hiring one or two people a year, how do you get past that? You have 1,000 people apply for a job. How do you filter out those 1,000? Or dating, same thing. Like, if I could say, okay, well, the world's my oyster for dating, but like in reality, I'm going to try to look for certain characteristics and qualities, just like I'm going to look for on a resume, that I think I'm going to be more attracted to. It's like, how do I do a filtering? Isn't part of a resume the filtering function? Well, okay, this person has this experience or they went to this university. That's a filtering function. So how do I get past that?
Yeah. So it's a backward approach. Like most people take a backward approach to recruiting, which is, how do I filter out people? And it should be more, or the way to success is to include people. How do I quickly identify who are going to be the right people who I can include in the process. The same with dating, right? If you start saying, oh, I have all these requirements for a potential partner, you might spend your whole life single or with the wrong people, right?
I know. I'm in
So
San Francisco. I know plenty of they're probably negative Peter Pans in a sense, right? Who spent their life single because they always looking for perfection.
Exactly. And they either have unrealistic expectations or they have unconscious or conscious bias, or they think, the world or, you know, their circle kind of operates in a certain way, right? So when a founder, to answer your question, is looking at, how do I make this decision? I don't hire that often. I mean, the first thing that I would say is obviously get help from an expert. If you're going to do anything in your business and you want to do it well, typically what you want to do is ask experts, people that have seen the movie before, who've done it before. So that's one angle, obviously. If you're going to go at it and DIY on your own, you have to know what to look for, and have to know what to include in that sort of discovery process. So an acronym that we came up with is TAG, which is trust, attitude, and grit. And those are the core kind of characteristics of someone that's going to do really well in a job or be a high agency or high performer, especially in kind of the group and the ICP that we work with, our clients being typically 1 to 100 employees.
So if you can't afford to hire a recruiter, so how do you go about building something that fits the tag worldview and create like a system in place to go do that? Like what does a founder go do if they're like, okay, I'm not going to go hire Adam because Adam's expensive, although everyone should of course hire you. But let's say they don't want to go do that, or they want to try it themselves at least first, which a lot of people, I find there's lots of founders who think I could go do something myself, and they go try it for many times and they realize, oh my God, this is way harder and more expensive than I actually thought. And then you just go outsource and hire the experts. So for the founders who want to try it themselves first, before they just go straight to you, how do they go about attempting that?
Yeah, I mean, but Adam, you said it right there, right? Like, not hiring a recruiter can be expensive, right? Like, not hiring the expert can be expensive in that way. But yeah, let's say you did go at it on your own. Many companies and people do. It's very, people tend to overcomplicate recruiting. It's actually pretty simple. It's what am I looking for today? What is the business problem that I'm trying to solve? That's all jobs are, right? So if I'm hiring, let's say, a salesperson, just to kind of level set, it's my problem is that I can't get out of, let's say, founder-led sales, and I need someone who can spend more time in their day, organizing our CRM, or meeting customers at a conference or an event. Whatever that business problem is, that's the job that you need to solve for, right? So very plainly, like, they need to figure out, is the person that they're looking for the right person? What's that archetype type look like? How do I identify that person? And you have to kind of list out sort of like the set of skills that would do well in that particular job, and sort of try to remove any bias that you might have from either past or present experience, and look at it objectively, right? And so that's what also makes hiring very hard doing a DIY. It's like, how do you have that judgment and that rigor when you don't do it, 24/7 like a recruiter would?
So kind of two key parts here, and one's going to keep pushing me a little bit here, a little bit. So one part of the question is like, I think founders in general need to have a really good understanding. It sounds like what you're saying, and some of the stuff I read about hiring, it's really important for us to have a good idea of what you're hiring for. It's sort of what you're saying. Like a lot of founders don't really know what they're looking for. They're like, oh, I want a sales guy who's going to be great and go crush. I'm like, well, okay, like what are the skills? What does that entail? What does that really mean? And most people don't spend the time to really go dig in on what that entails. So it's not like one part you're saying like, hey, go get that right. Like understand what you're really looking to hire for, which can be difficult because of course most founders have one superpower. That's why they started their company. They're a founder because they have a superpower. That doesn't mean they have any knowledge or skill set in all the other things that you need to do to run a business the right way. Yes, a founder is smart. They will work hard, but like that doesn't mean they have those skills. So they really need to get smart on like, what do I really want in that job? The second part that I want to push on still is like, okay, let's pretend I've identified at a high level, like, what do I really want in that person and skill set? How do I get beyond the resume? How do I build a system that I can still filter people out instead of just having 1,000 people who all claim they are the best in the world and I ignore their resume?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of people are gonna say like, okay, yeah, Adam, what's that silver bullet? What are the, top 10 interview questions that I can ask, right, to get it right? It's not that simple, and it is that simple. You need to kind of treat interviewing and identifying the right person as you would kind of like any relationship, right? Like, can I trust this person? Am I going to work well with them? Do they have the right attitude? Someone that I'm going to be able to work with for a long time. And so you have to treat those interviews like conversations, like a podcast like this, right? Where you're really digging in, getting to know someone, listen for cues, ask them about their past experience, but also be very transparent about what it's like to work in your company, or if you're, solo founder hiring the first person, what it's like to work with you. What's the good, bad, and the ugly? Because most people come to us for a new job and change jobs because the job that they're currently in wasn't what it was sold to them on. So they want to change because it wasn't as prescribed.
So some more interesting questions there too. But before we get there, I'm gonna keep pushing you a little bit, right? So I get to the point once you get to an interview, you want to get to this trust level. It takes a lot of time to build up trust, even in an interview. And you can get some heuristics of trust from an interview into someone you get along with them. But how do I even get someone to an interview? Let's say I have 500 people apply for my sales job or something. How do I build? How do I, without using a resume or other base level things, like what school did the person go to? Were they doing the same job previously? How do I get past that level, or what do I do to get away from it and not use a resume as my CYA or base level judgment call?
Well, you can only use the tools in front of you, right? Like, so if you're relying on resumes, then you have to use resumes. It's not the optimal way to hire, and it's not going to reduce your risk in hiring, which is my job for my clients, right? You can obviously lean on LinkedIn, which is a, publicly facing resume that, people, it's harder to lie on, right?
Why is it harder to lie on LinkedIn? I mean, yeah, you're a
It's
public.
harder than a resume, not impossible, right? So, because you could get called out on it, right? Whereas like a resume, you're just sending into ATS, you're hoping that, maybe they don't call you references or
Or I do find people lie on LinkedIn. You're right. Is they don't lie about like the actual maybe job or role. They might embellish a little bit here and there, but even worse is when they say like I'm still at the company, right? A lot of times people will still say I'm employed by that company, even though they were fired or let go or left or whatever the reason is. And it still just says, well, ongoing. And then like, oh, you can't talk to my former manager at my company because I don't want them to get tipped off that I'm still there. Like, how do you should deal with those situations?
there's back channeling, right? Like you have to be able to hiring is about balance, right? Like it's the candidate has to make the right decision just as much as the company has to make the right decision to get to that, high retention, high fit. And so you just have to do due diligence the same way that the candidate would do due diligence, right? So a way that you could interview a candidate is like, you know, what is the project that you worked on as an example, and who did you work on with on that project? What were their names? And can I talk to them about that project, right? If let's say you've been at a company for a long time and you can't let your employer know that you're looking, maybe it's customers that you worked with, a vendor that you paid, right? If you're in accounting, like there's lots of ways to go about it. We brought up dating a lot, the same way with that, right? Like you just want to, meet the family, meet people that, that they're friends with, right? It's a process of, reducing your risk and making it putting yourself in a position where you can make the best possible decision. And so, it could be checking with, on their education, could be checking with somewhere that they volunteer,
Yeah.
people, somebody in a run club, could be anything, right? So
So well, not I won't over belabor the point, but like, so do you use resumes at like the top of the funnel, like your resumes or LinkedIn, to like say, hey, you're doing a job search for someone. Will you use at least like LinkedIn or a resume just to figure out like, is this person even a potential fit? Like, there must be some way to figure out, like, or do you just ignore resumes completely?
it's not that we adore resumes. I mean, companies have a comfort, as I mentioned, with resumes. So a lot of our clients like want to see resumes. The thing that I like to say, I like to be push back on resumes because because they're known to be a poor predictor of success. So you shouldn't rely on them as a function of making a really good decision. And what happens is with top performers, for example, like how long has it been since you've updated your resume, right? So with top performers or a lot of high agency people that are happy in their jobs, which are typically the most high performing employees, which is what we focus on, which is headhunting top talent. They don't have an updated resume, and the time that it's going to take them to update a resume is just not worth it, right? So that's another benefit of LinkedIn that's, should be and is typically updated a lot more than a resume, right? So, but again, you have to use the tools that are available to you. So it depends on your position and where you're at with the hiring process and what tools are available to you.
It still can be like a filtering function at least. Like obviously there has to be some signal to say like this person's like, you're not going to go try to hire a doctor to be in a salesperson's role because the doctor's been in their doctor role for 20 years. Like, well, you clearly are someone who, there's some filtering, right? At some point you're saying like, we're going to look at something to say like, you're potentially partially qualified for the role. And obviously then you need to filter out in different ways.
Yes, I would just say that the resume and the application process is more of a clutch for the company to help them make a decision or filter through applications than it is a benefit for them to make a really good decision. So if it's like a doctor, the best hires come from referrals, right? So if you're looking for a doctor, for example, we've hired for a bunch of veterinarians as an example, right? So we talk to people to see, hey, who are the best veterinarians that you've ever worked with? And we don't need that veterinarian's resume,
Yeah.
right, to make that decision. We know that they work at that company. We can see that their profile online. We can do some social checks. I mean, it's just we're kind of beyond that stage. I think that like it's not that resumes are something that you can't use. It's just if you want to be optimal in terms of making better decisions hiring, it shouldn't be something that you need to use.
Yeah, no, totally fair. I would say at Chore, we tried really hard to optimize our entire recruiting and hiring process. And so for one of the main roles that we have, I don't know if any of it's based in a resume at all. Like literally the entire application is filled with, you have to write certain things out. There's a whole test. There's a number of steps you need to take. And it sort of tests grit. It tests detail orientation. And there's almost a bunch of little nuances and tests, even within the tests that we ask that make it really unique and really showcases as someone a good fit. And very few people make it through that entire process before they even get to an interview. And I don't know if we even look at a resume in that entire process as part of it. So we've flipped it on its head. So I agree with you, but I think it takes a lot of work to set that up. But once you do, it should save you a ton of time and gives everyone a chance if this is something, and it gives them an idea what the role is going to look like as well. So it's sort of a win-win on both sides.
Yeah, it's great. I love to hear it.
So going back, we kind of got on a super sidetrack, but where I like to get started with. But you're a multi-time entrepreneur, founder. Walk me through like how do you define or what is entrepreneurial excellence? Like what does excellence mean to you? What is an excellent entrepreneur?
I've been in it for 2 decades. It's just being an athlete of business, right? So you need to have a super high pain tolerance and be willing to do a lot of repetition and things over and over again with a mindset of how can I perform better every single day to optimize, either how my business is run, the place in the world, my goal, my mission. So to me, entrepreneurship is, a fit for people that are willing to put up with more pain and perseverance than most other people are.
So I'd agree. How do you build that grit, to use it in a good term that you used earlier? Like how do you individually as a person, how have you built that grit or pain tolerance for yourself? Like how have you become an athlete of business? Like what do you do personally? What have you done with your businesses? So how can people emulate the success that you've had?
Yeah, I don't think it's something that I don't think grit's something that you can teach. I think it has to just be inherently in your blood or the way that you see the world, I guess, right? I've been working 2 to 3 jobs since I was a teenager, right? So my parents like came to Canada and I've just always been taught hard work. And so for me, there was never another option. And I also never continued to do something that I didn't feel like I could be the ultimate best at. So just, I don't think you can teach that to someone. I think you can I think it helps if you're around other people or if you're in a situation where you need to kind of get out and become that sort of like gritty, hardworking individual. But, it's not like I need to, go for a cold plunge in order to, spend the rest of my day. I personally think that if you ever feel like some people ask me, like, what if I'm not motivated to do, XYZ, right? My answer is simple. It's like, you got to pay to someone else to start feeling that pain. So, for example, if you have trouble kind of like, getting out of the bed and getting to work, pay for an office, right? Because that's going to burn a hole in your pocket and force you into something.
Yep.
If you can't go to the gym, pay for a personal trainer because that's going to burn a hole in the pocket. That person's going to be calling you. It's the same way sports teams are set up, right? Like, you know, Tiger Woods needs a caddy. He needed his dad to be there like every day as a coach, right? So it's just there's that same thing within business that I find, and it's across everyone that I kind of talk to.
What were the pain or the things you paid for that helped you keep you motivated? Are there things you were paying for? Like, how did that work for you individually?
Yeah, those are real examples. When I started my business, there were definitely days that I felt like were super, super tough. I started this business in the 2008 recession or afterwards. And so nobody was hiring at that point. I wanted to respectfully go to a completely different industry, completely different customers, start completely from scratch than the people that I worked with before, because I'd built up a lot of respect for the people that I worked with previously. So everything that I did, every new contact was completely from scratch, no former relationship with them. And so it was hard. And so even though money was scarce at that time, I still put it into an office. Like I just, paid somebody else to sublease a tiny office within a Regis. It was like a sublease of a sublease. and and that person, pushed me to move forward. There were other people in the building that also, pushed me to move forward, right? So you could be the most motivated person in the world, but like you kind of need that pain. Working out, same thing. I like to pay, and invest in someone else that's going to keep me accountable, right? So you kind of have to, put up something to
Do you,
to get it back.
do you have an executive coach as well?
I do. I've gone through a couple. Like for me, I'm kind of somebody who I don't like love homework. I want to be with someone that is not going to be a motivational speaker because I'm already motivated to move the business forward from that standpoint. So I don't need them that aspect. But I do have business coaches in different areas of the business and growth and finance that I count on for like specific speared tasks that I can say, okay, this person's an expert and this is what I should do given the cards that I currently have.
No, that's great. I went back and forth with coaches myself too, but I think I have one right now, and I think it's generally very good. Walk me through really quickly, going back in your own personal history. Like, how did your parents, like, what did your parents come from? How did they motivate you to go down this path? Because look, you as an entrepreneur, and every entrepreneur, you're a little bit different than probably your friends growing up. Like something was different in your childhood that pushed you to decide you want to go through all these pieces of pain and it's hard work to become someone unique and special and different and worth having on a podcast. Like what was it about growing up or your parents that you think led you down this path?
I mean, I think it was just start working from a young age. Have to make money to be able to afford the things that I want, right? And sort of see that what lied ahead of me was either, nothing or what I put into it. And so I think that was like a key component. Also, just seeing sort of like how my family, came to Canada and just, started working, right? My mom also started her own business, kind of teaching people computers, and was a teacher and was getting her, teaching degree at the same time, right? And 2 kids. So I think that definitely, sparked something in me. But for me, it's about I just want to do something that I think that I can be proud of and that I, feel like I'm going to be the best person at doing, and be able to do it at an elite level. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do from a career perspective. So I tried a bunch of things. I tried teaching, I like shadowed some architects, I worked at a vet clinic, I, did retail, I did serving, everything that every door that opened, I just tried it. Right. So it was like the try attitude. And when I came into recruiting and realized that like this was something that I was actually good at and everything else I was mediocre at, that's when, I decided to get into it. And I just became so passionate about and obsessed about making sure that companies, and especially small businesses and startups, because that's who I know. I think small businesses like really drive the economy, drive a lot of economic development. And so I'm super passionate about making sure that they hire their top performers fast. A goal is for them to hire the top performer in 48 hours. And also candidates get into the right role. A lot of candidates make the wrong decision in terms of where they should be, and it hurts their career trajectory. That kind of, obsession is just continuing to drive me uh, to what I want to be as the number one person that startups reach out to when they want to hire.
So why SMBs or startups? Like I work with a lot of startups in my company. We basically would just work with startups, but it is a harder path. Big companies have a lot more hires they're making. They can put you on retainer. There's lots of more. It's an easier world to do that. So why work with SMBs? I love the thesis about the world's a better place with more successful SMBs. It's a thesis in a sense that I share very deeply, but it's a lot harder. Like why focus on that area instead of going for kind of larger contracts or larger businesses?
I think it's just a different type of hard, but it's more like I feel closely passionate because, I'm a small business. My mom had a small business. A lot of my friends who started businesses and, early clients that gave me an opportunity were small businesses, go into their office, see what they're building, where they're getting their products made. I think just sparks something in me that I just want to focus on that particular category. I think hiring is very different at every stage in your business, but from 0 to 100 is very different from who you'd hire, 100 to 1,000 people and above, right? So from a drive for excellence point of view, I want to make sure that there's just no other company that really understands what it takes to be successful at that stage in a business.
Mm. What you mentioned, like you tried all these different jobs. What about recruiting stood out to you? What about it was like, this is where I can be great? Like, how did you, like, if someone's listening to this and trying to figure out their own career paths, what about recruiting was like, oh, this is for me, whereas the others were not? What made it stand out?
I think it's like I just realized the impact that it can make. I think great people is the ultimate unlock. Probably most underrated way to build a really great business, add economic value, drive growth, be happy at home, add to people around you. It's like it, creates an ecosystem. And so, I think that was one thing. I also was just very driven by business books, right? And business leaders. And while most people, I think, were reading, fiction, for me, it was like biographies and business books and sales books. And then the other thing is, I think that hiring touches everyone. You either get hired or you're looking to hire someone at some point. And so I thought, hey, this is great because this is where I can make a true impact at the beginning stages of someone's career when they transition. When a company's trying to raise money, before a company tries to exit, like the people in the culture in the org, truly matter. And then the other thing, it might sound crazy to some, but I just found like I had a sixth sense at recruiting. I could really, I would think about somebody and they would call me,
Mm,
right?
weird. Yeah.
I would think about somebody on a call and be like, you should hire this person, and they would hire that person. And a lot of the people that I hire also tend to have that sixth sense, which is like, the first person we want to send a client after we do a really strong discovery is the person that they'll probably hire, if not at least interview and add to that org. So
So you had a front row seats, like hundreds of founders making their first hire, right? Or first 10 hires at least. Like what are the great ones do very like great and do differently from the very first search? Like what do the great founders do that the only okay founders or the founders who fail don't do?
So yeah, the main thing is that they prioritize hiring. So, a lot of companies think that they're prioritizing hiring, but they delay the process. They don't give feedback to their recruiter or candidates, which really delays the product process. Time kills all deals, right? So you just have to move fast. And if you don't move fast in recruiting, like you're left behind. That is like one of the core. It's you need speed, you need quality, you need a good experience. So
This is something I've gotten fairly annoyed in my recruiting team for, where we went through a period where it was taking us a month sometimes to get back to people. And I was like, this is unacceptable, irrespective of even if that person's still available. I would not want to be that candidate on the other side waiting for a month and not hearing back. We should not do that. Even if we're not going to hire the person, they deserve an answer quickly from us about whether we're moving forward or not. And if we're unable to do that, we our process is broken and we need to fix it. And I think we fixed it in a really good way and people get very fast responses now. But I agree, like it needs to be a fast turnaround.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like if you're, selling, if you're a business owner and you're selling to a business and, that prospect doesn't get back to you and you've spent, a number of meetings, drove to their office, you built a whole presentation and then they all of a sudden like ghost you or just don't tell you yes or no, you're going to be frustrated. So, you got to treat people the way you want to be treated. Right. And so I just feel like people typically brush off hiring. Oh, of course they're going to want to work with me. We offer all this great stuff. We're building this product that's going to change the world. They should be happy that they're even interviewing with me, right? And it's just the wrong approach. The better approach, the much better approach is how do I create an environment where people are not only attracted to working with me, but they tell other people about me, right? Like it's referrals and references are huge. So
I think the best founders that I know say they spend anywhere almost up to 50% of their time on recruiting. And that is a huge part of their job. I would say I don't see it with myself all the time, but I am spending I still interview. We're about 50 people at my company, Chore. And I interview every single candidate that comes through. Once again, we have a very rigorous process now. So except for very senior hire, I still interview everybody, but except for very senior hire, I probably don't get involved until the very late stages. But even then, when you're recruiting senior people, if you're the CEO or founder, you need to be spending a lot of time. Like these are people you should be, in my mind, tell me if this is right. You should be going out to dinners, lunches, meeting these people, sitting down with them, really get to know them for a senior role, get to know them well. And then if you're someone more junior, that hiring manager should be spending that same amount of time with that person because that hiring manager is responsible for that good new hire. Recognizing the importance of recruiting for your business and like how important it is for your team, right? I assume, tell me if this is right. I assume you probably would say like a good business, the foundation of a good business in many cases is the team that you have. And therefore spending a lot of time upfront to make that team, to get the right team is critical to the long-term success.
100%. Yeah. It's like you'll fall to you don't fall to the level of your goals, you fall to your systems, you'll fall to the level of your people, right? So they will become the bottleneck. A lot of operators and founders are the bottleneck because they hold up the company in terms of hiring. I spoke to a company recently where by the time they like end up signing recruiting contracts with the right recruiter, they could have hired the person like 3 weeks ago, right? And so they're losing business, but they're prioritizing other things that are just gonna start breaking. And I see it. It's not like I'm saying, oh, I think it's breaking. I can see who raises money, who exits. I've worked with hundreds of founders that have either made great decisions or made really bad calls. And there were, there is a lot of commonalities between those that make really great decisions.
So actually, what are the commonalities? Like, what are the commonalities you see the people who are like, all right, I'm going to prioritize hiring. I'm going to do this right. I'm going to move quickly and not wait. an extra 6 months before I hire the recruit. What are the commonalities that those founders have? Like, that's what we're trying to get to meet up, right, for this podcast, right?
Mhm.
What are the commonalities shared by those founders who find continued success?
It's an ability to move fast like they would with any other area of their business. If it was a sale, you would want to respond quickly if it was a lead, right? So, and the way that they treat leads and customers and their employees, the same way that they would treat their recruiting funnel. I found that those founders and operators are able to hire people much faster. They beat their competitors in terms of if there are multiple offers, they're getting those candidates for a lower salary overall, lower compensation. Those candidates are staying a lot longer. They're telling their friend they need to use recruiters less because there's more attraction to that brand, and the company ends up growing more, so they're able to raise more. They're able to, have their their EBITDA is higher, right? Like all these things kind of steamroll that process that starts from the understanding the business problem. Like, do I need 10 people? Do I need one person? Do I need what type of person do I need? Do I need a salesperson? Do I need a sales analyst? Or do I need a sales leader, right? Understanding what you need to the right business problem at the right time, and then being able to execute on that.
So to bring it down, just like really simply, it's basically speed. Oh, speed is the number one signal you think that's like a common trait about the most successful founders. It's like, how fast can you respond back on anything, be it a question from a recruiter, be it a decision to hire a recruiter, be it getting on a call with the candidate you want to hire. Is essentially speed the number one predictor of success in your mind?
I would say so, yes.
Can you train that in someone? Like, how does someone get good at speed?
I think it's one of those things where it's either a trait that you have or you want to get to, or you don't have it, right? So I think hiring is one of those things where companies are pretty slow. It's like they don't feel like their hair's on fire. Whereas most other parts of the business, like if their website's broken, right? They'll call the developer and be like, "Hey, get up, fix this," right? If they run events and the mics aren't working, it's like, "Hey, fix this now," right? Um, there's a problem with a bank or somebody does something and takes money out of their bank, like they're on that, right? With hiring, it's like, well, maybe I'll meet them in a couple days. Maybe I'll meet them in a week. Maybe there's somebody better.
Which, by the way, I would say is completely backwards, right? It seems like that's just an insanely backwards way of viewing it because hiring takes a long time. You need to do everything you can to shorten that process and speed it up as much as possible, right? Even if you know, review someone's resume today, interview them tomorrow, make an offer the day after, like it's still going to be, they still need to give at least probably 2 weeks notice at their current job, maybe more if they're really senior. It's going to take them a month or two to get really going with your company. It could take up to 6 months before they really get going and moving quickly in an ROI positive value add to your business. So waiting every second is painful. Whereas what's your website, example about my website breaking? Yeah, like website broken is really critical, but like I need to be able to get that done. I can get that turned around really quickly. Whereas it's a 6 month process to hire someone great.
I think that people feel like they need to hire slow, fire fast. And I think it's one of the biggest lies ever been
Oh,
told.
that's great. I love that. Okay, tell me more.
Hiring doesn't need to be slow. Like companies just make it slow because, again, back to what we were talking about earlier, people are, whether it's like ego or just uncertainty, right? Or like they've just made mistakes in the past. They're not sure like how to move forward. They spend more time making the decision because they think it's going to be astronomical, but it's more costly to delay hiring than it is to hire the wrong person, right? Because the wrong person is not great, but the stress on your team, the function of how they got brought into the company is worse than the delay and the opportunity cost that it creates. Obviously, the best outcome is to hire great people really fast. And they're just key ways that you can kind of set yourself up for success in being able to do that. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's so at Chore, we try really hard to obviously this whole process in place to try to hire the right people up front and get that correct, but we still get it wrong sometimes. But we also then move people pretty quickly. If it's not working, we will call you out pretty quickly and let you know, and then move on. I don't think anyone wins if the person's struggling in their role. If we want to help them get better, but if that's just not happening despite us trying, we'll say, hey, like, this isn't a fit. And then it's a win for them, a win for us. Everyone moves on. You don't want to keep someone on who's not right. And then look, hopefully we try to do a retro after every single hire when it doesn't work out, understand what we got wrong, and then improve from there. You're still never going to have a perfect hiring process. I don't think any company will, but no, it's a good point. Let's talk briefly about sales hiring, because I think it's sort of a critical hire, right? And I think you've talked about it a bunch, right? First sales hire is like replacing the founder from founder-led sales. It's not really just hiring a salesperson. What does that actually mean? I mean, I have a decent idea, but like explain that, break it down. What does it really mean to hire that first sales hire if you were the founder previously leading sales yourself?
Yeah, so I find like this is one of the hardest roles to fill. Anything where the founder is or the person that's like closely tied to the business is trying to replace themselves because technically they're irreplaceable. And you want to hire for things that you are, not as great at,
Hmm.
like the yin and the yang, right? To be able to build the business in the right way. Like if you're the strongest salesperson in the room and you're hiring a salesperson over somebody else that can tackle things that you're not strong at, maybe staying organized, like an executive assistant, then that's the better hire to make first, right? You do want to hire for not necessarily what you don't like to do, but what you're an elite player at, right? So just like building a sports team, like there are certain positions that people should be playing. And so from a sales perspective, most founders are the first salesperson. They know what they know. They've built kind of like the sales playbook.
Hopefully,
Their
you haven't
expectation.
actually built an actual playbook, but they have an idea of how to sell at least.
Yeah, they've done the door knocking, right? When they think that, they're doing it in the optimal way. And then they want to hire someone to either help them do it in a more optimal way, tell them what they're not doing properly. But the expectation is that that person is going to be able to sell to the same level as they sell, which isn't the case. Like they're not the owner of the business. They're not the person that has, driven the vision over the last several years, decade, whatever it is, right? When you need to get a sales person right, they need to have extremely good chemistry with the founder because doing sales properly is the first touch point to the customer. And if it doesn't align like values wise with the founder, that's normally when it breaks.
Mhm.
So it's like sometimes people say, oh, well, like, I want to hire a salesperson that is going to be, super organized. They're going to put everything in the CRM because I don't do that.
Hmm.
Um, but then their expectation is that they're going to do twice as much. Like there's time with all this stuff. Obviously, AI makes you, 10x better. But they need to really figure out sort of like what are the strengths and the weaknesses of this person. Maybe it's they hire someone that oversells like the product, and the product can't deliver on that. And then they wonder why they can't sell, right? Why those customers are churning, right? So the chemistry, the philosophy, the values around how they want the company to look from a sales perspective often gets missed,
Mm.
right? They don't see that as a separate part of the business.
So how do they do it the right way then? Like what do you, when you do it right, what are you doing to get it right?
It's very dependent because it depends on like, the stage of the company, what they're selling, their sales cycle, if they need somebody that has come from within the industry or they need somebody that they can mold. There's a lot of founders that are very successful that hire people that just knock on their door more and they're willing to be a sponge and they move forward, but they've got time to spend with that person, right? So, it's hard for me to answer because I would dive in with the founder on like, you know, what problem do you want to
Mm.
solve, right? And then let's build a profile around that. Like, you don't build the profile first, you build the problem first, and then you find the solution for it, right? So after hiring thousands of people, I mean, what most sales leaders tell me makes a salesperson successful is curiosity, grit, and coachability. If they've got those three things, they will have. And you can't do a personality test to kind of confirm these things. You have to really dig into like why are they a hard worker, what makes them a hard worker, all these things, right, to kind of move forward. So that's kind of like the baseline, but it's a little more complicated than that, and that's why um, you got to do the upfront work.
Yeah, no, I would, it's funny. I've hired a lot of salespeople and in most cases it has not worked out. At least the recent ones, and who knows, it's maybe me, but the recent ones, some examples would be like, I would tell people, hey, look, here's a list of, I think we have a whole, like a whole explanatory track that people need to follow. or a bunch of, and we also have a bunch of training videos and things. I'm like, hey, like go through these, ask me a lot of questions about what doesn't make sense, as an example. And when we hire these salespeople and then they don't ask me any questions whatsoever, and then we do a day or two later, I'm like, hey, like let's do a practice pitch. Do a practice pitch for me. And they kind of do it, but they don't do a good job. I'm like, hey, like, did you review all the other example pitches that I gave you? And like, I didn't see any questions. So what questions do you have? And they say, I don't have any questions. I'm like, that's to me a really early signal that that salesperson isn't going to work out. It's like, wait, so you actually haven't spent any time looking at our pitch. You're not trying to become great at this pitch. Like to me, if I were coming in as a salesperson in a company, I would hope one of the first things I would do is like, I want to go listen to all of your pitches. I want to go practice. I'll just practice with myself or practice with AI. I'm going to turn on AI and tell AI to be a pretend customer. And I'm going to go pitch this nonstop. And within like a day or two, I should be great at it. An example of this on the flip side is we have a current sales guy and he did this exactly that. Like he literally was asking me nonstop questions. He's like, I built this whole script out on my own. What do you think of this? Does this make sense? I took the stuff you had. Here's what I think. Here's how it works. Like he did all of that work himself. I was like, oh, you're curious. You have that level of grit in coachability that a lot of the others didn't have. And that's why this guy, I think, is why he's far better and still around. Beyond sales, what hires do founders underinvest in, especially early on, that turn out to be like kind of a make or break decision for them?
I mean, again, it depends on what's important to their business or like and what problem they need to solve for sure. But like generally, some key early hires would be an executive assistant or a VA, depending on like what they're doing. Like I find like a lot of founders, especially small businesses, can't get out of the weeds or get past a certain revenue stage because they want to touch everything and be in the minutia of the day to day. Like, oh, I need to do this or I need to do that. It's like they need to figure out. Not every business needs to scale at a certain level. I mean, it depends on how you want to run your business, right? But there are certain tasks that if you're running a business beyond just you, that you need to be able to pass on to other, capable high agency people to, move the business forward. So you need to figure out who that is. So that's a long way of saying like an executive assistant is one of those areas. I would say like somebody on the financial side. I mean, because businesses run based on numbers, so a lot of people just get either a fractional CFO or financial help too late. Business is very like customer focused. Sometimes founders spend too long like with their customers and they need customer success person. So all kind of like relative, but every job should have an outcome, and you need to make sure that the jobs that you're creating for your team have outcomes.
I'm biased. I will add that I think everyone should get someone to run their back office operations, to run HR, finance, as you mentioned, compliance. That's what my company Chore does, right? Is like that whole thesis is, because I totally agree. Founders spend way too much time in the weeds. They end up, a lot of founders who fail are founders I find who end up thinking that like my job is doing the random little things that come up at like firefighting all day long. And it's like, and they feel good about it. They're like, oh, I'm doing a good job as CEO because I took care of this payroll issue or this other financial issue or whatever. That's not your job. Like that's actually, that is literally the way you fail. Your job is to do what you started your company to do, which is theoretically why someone gave you money or why someone's buying your product, is because you're great at something. You should be putting all of your time and energy into that, not into all the little things, firefighting weeds, which is why we recommend people hire Chore. You get essentially a fractional chief of staff to run this stuff. And then you don't necessarily need an EA, actually, in many cases. Like we have a lot of customers who have EAs, and EAs do very different work than Chore. But in some cases, people try to have their EA do back office work, which is a total mess too.
I think that, it just becomes busy work, right? And you need, experts like you and Chore to help the business like move forward, right? Otherwise you stay stuck.
Correct. And busy work's the problem. Once again, a lot of people, I view busy work in a work perspective really similar to like sort of TikTok or Instagram in life, right? It's like they're like empty calories. It like makes you feel good in the moment because like you want something to distract yourself from whatever your challenges are day to day. And so you can do the little easy thing. Well, like, oh man, I unblocked this payroll issue. Okay, like that's important. Your team got paid, so you feel like you did something good. But you didn't deal with the bigger issue, which is like your product is breaking all day long, and that's going to take you're going to take you a week or two to refactor it. But you don't want to do that because it takes 2 weeks and it's really hard and it might not work out. Whereas you can solve the small little problem that it makes you feel good. Great, but your company's still burning. Like the big picture is your company's still burning and you haven't fixed that part. Do you think like there's always a debate between, especially early on, generalists versus specialists? Do you have an opinion about that?
I do believe that experts and spheres or specialists are key because then you could just I believe in doing very high quality work, right? Like I believe in the optimal way for of hospitality. Like I love Unreasonable Hospitality, the book, right? I love the way sports teams are set up, where like there's a specialist in each position. So definitely that. But sometimes you need a generalist because of your budget, right? It could be a budgetary decision. It could be because you have multiple things going on in the business that need and you have ambiguity because you're a startup and things change and like you might need somebody that's a general. So it depends, but I would lean towards a specialist and like an expert for each role. You can't be incredible at a million things, right? Like most people are incredible at one or two things, and so it's their linchpin, like what their superpower is, and so 9 out of 10 times that's what I tell people to go for instead of the generalist.
What's your opinion about remote versus in person? Especially, at least let's talk about like venture back companies to an extent, like remote versus in person, pros and cons. What does it look like, or maybe different stages?
It depends on the founder because, and the executive team of how they optimally work. The big difference between remote and in office is that particular person, where do they go to get success and where can they optimize their success? Some people work exceptionally well at remote. They're self-motivated, they do more than the time that they spend in the office and people go knock on their door or they spend like waiting in transit. 100%. Um, but there's other people, 'cause people are all different, that just work much better, even though they don't want to think that they work much better in person. And so you have to kind of start from there, like what kind of culture we want to create. Neither is wrong. If a company builds remotely, then they have a larger pool of talent. You just have more options to choose from, right? You have a bigger store. And in office, it's harder to do. But there are definite key benefits, especially if you're hiring people that are um, newer in their career, and shadowing or that type of learning speeds up success. When I see people getting trained remote versus in office, the speed in office is much higher.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think the other trade-off, though, of course, is the ability to hire great people anywhere in the world, right? Your talent pool is smaller in any single geographic location. And potentially, depending on your geographic location, it can be much more expensive, right? If you're hiring an engineer in San Francisco, it's a really different price than hiring an engineer in New Delhi, right? In India.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Just cost of living.
It's yeah, you've shrunken your pool of talent in terms of what options you have. It's the same way with compensation, right? I always tell my clients like, somewhat depends on your budget or what you're willing to pay or what that person is worth to you. Because if you could pay $1 million, you have and your job is remote, and you have your decision of you can hire whoever you want, right? And you have a good brand and you move fast, like that's the ultimate, right? And then the further you move down that list, so less compensation, hybrid, it just gets a smaller and smaller pool. It's harder to hire for.
I'm glad you brought up compensation. It's one thing I want to talk about with you. How do you figure out the right compensation? So this is something that's actually near and dear to my heart right now. We I think keep updating our compensation to some extent and how we do compensation at Shore and have done it over the past few years. I don't think we've updated it that much, although I know some people on my team would disagree. But one of the debates we always have is like, sometimes there's a base level component, like how much should you pay at base? And that's a big question for a lot of people, right? What is base versus inflation versus competitive marketplace dynamics versus things like deflation? What I mean by that is like, in the past few years, we've gone through a world where there are a lot more candidates looking for jobs than there are jobs available, in which case I've seen sort of there to be a stagnation in compensation in some cases. How do you build the appropriate compensation? Sure. I mean, like outside of just everyone asking AI, like, here's my job description, how much should I pay? How do you really get it right and locked in? Or what are the signals? I assume a signal is like, am I getting a lot of high quality candidates apply for the job? But like, how do you do compensation right?
Adam, you're gonna make me piss off a lot of people that focus their whole careers on compensation. But I will say that it is only the value that somebody's willing to take, the person that you need, right? So it's like anything that you buy, it's like, what's somebody willing to pay for it? If I want that thing, am I willing to pay for it? Um, the salary that AI gives you, or, salary surveys, like, they hold only little weight, right? It really depends on what people want, right? So it's not like, what is the compensation you're currently making? Everybody usually wonders, like, hey, what was the person making at their job? Oh, I don't want to pay them, 10, $15,000 more than we're making right now. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, because if you want that person, they won't make a move unless they want anything else. Just like somebody won't sell a house if they don't get that price, right? So you have to really identify what is the comp that somebody's willing to make a move for. Maybe it's not the salary, maybe it's partly salary, partly equity, maybe it's more benefits, maybe it's remote, maybe it's all about the drivers of what's important to somebody, and that's what drives them to make a change and stay. So if they're getting everything that they want, they're not going to leave.
And then how do you deal with like this is maybe a little bit beyond the sort of recruiting side, but even keeping people happy over time? And so what I mean specifically, this is something we've talked about a lot at Shorts. I've been thinking about this a bunch recently. Our base salary, like to be very straightforward, like our base salary for what we pay has not changed in almost 4 years. Um, Now we have a lot of people who've been here a while and say like, hey, that's unfair, right? Like obviously inflation has gone up. I totally get it. I understand where they're coming from. On the other hand, what I say to them is, hey, look, the quality of the candidates that we've been able to attract has at minimum stayed the same over those 4 years, or if anything, gone up in quality. Not to downplay anyone else who's been there previously, but like we've, so arguably the amount we're paying is still very fair for the market. On the other hand, what we have done is we've really increased the upside. So we're saying, hey, the sort of starting salary is almost like a training salary. Like we actually expect people to be promoted within 6 to 9 months of when they first start. And it takes 6 months to get someone really trained up and doing great work and being kind of ROI positive. And so once they get that going, they should be hitting that next level anyways. And then when they get to level 2, let's call it the next level up, they should be at a point where they are well compensated for the role. Maybe not like massively above market, but like at least at a really good point. But to your point, if like people are applying, that to me implies they are buying. I actually had an interview with someone yesterday for one of these roles. And I asked him, I said, hey, look, like you probably were making more money in some of your other roles. Like why apply for this? He's like, look, the amount you're paying in the next level up totally fits within what I'm expecting and what I'm looking for. I don't know. When I hear that, I'm like, okay, it sounds like our price is right. And I told him like, but my goal is to get you to the next level up and get to a point where you're making a huge bonus on a regular basis and all these other things. Like, yeah, dude, I want to get there too. But I also understand like I'm starting at this and that's totally fine for my expectations. So like, how does a company balance that, especially then once again with like growth with people who are still there in making sure they also can feel like they are compensated fairly for their role? Because we don't want to have a lot of turnover on the team. Like that's painful too. So how do you balance elements where it's like, well, like so once again, my current team was like, hey, but inflation's gone up a ton. Like, yeah, but like AI has pushed everyone's prices down. So I can't pay more necessarily if you're going to keep working the same way. You need to increase how you're working so I can pay you more because I want to pay you more. But like we keep getting this thing and just say like, long story short, I don't really believe in cost of living increases unless we are seeing a comparative increase in the revenue or margins we have as a company. Like what people don't seem to sometimes get is like, if cost of living goes up and therefore you keep upgrading how much you pay for people, but the way you work has remained flat or the same, that is exactly the way recipe for having a failing business.
Bankrupt. Yeah.
You can't afford to do that. So you need to improve how you're working if you want to get paid more. Or the company goes out of business, in which case everyone loses their job, and that still sucks too. So like, I don't know, long way of saying, what do you do? How do you deal with those two elements where it's like, I want to pay a fair price while also keeping the current team happy, energized, excited?
Yeah. A lot of really great questions. We go over this all the time. And so really comes down to, you can pay what you can afford, right? Like businesses are to make money, and a lot of reasons why, like you said, alluded to, companies go bankrupt is because they manage their cash poorly, right? They had a poor allocation of cash. And so one of the issues is that a lot of people not running businesses just have poor financial acumen. And so they don't understand that a business is involved to make money. And if, like if everyone's getting a raise, then, the company could potentially fold. And so that is one of the problems where people need to get more, just if people want to move forward in their career, they really need to understand how business works, what happens if we lose a customer? What happens if we gain a customer? How does that change the business, right? So that's one thing that great candidates can do to get even better. The other thing is that so when candidates say, "Oh, this company is like underpaying," or this isn't market value," like it doesn't really matter because they might be a different size, have a different customer, have a different sales cycle. There's all these be in a different financial position. Sure, these bigger companies can pay more money. They just have a bigger pool, right? So that is one thing. I also realized that like where companies should start is, are the people on my bus
Mm.
getting paid the right price first before I even go out and hire, right?
And like the
Um,
people who are currently there, are they like, or do I want them on this bus still? And if so, then what do I need to do to get them excited?
exactly. You should always be doing like never exit interviews, always stay interviews. So
Mm.
constantly. No even, not even waiting for it. Just like when an issue comes up, if like read the Red Book Radical Candor, you talk about it. Hey, why do you want to be here? What would be a reason why you would leave this company tomorrow? And just keeping your top performers happy. Most people make a mistake because they spend so much time with their underperformers. You want to spend a lot of time with their top performers, keep them engaged. They're going to attract more top performers, and their underperformers will self-select out.
How do you
And
do those stay interviews the right way? So I'll give you an example. I try pretty hard. We've got 50 people at Chore, but I try to reach out to people on a somewhat regular basis. Do voice. We're fully remote, so I'll do like a voice note to someone instead of just typing it. Like, hey, like how's it going? What can I do? What can we do differently? How do we improve? Sometimes people respond. Sometimes people don't respond at all. And I don't, when they don't, it's not required to respond to me. I'm not going to fire someone because they don't respond. But like, how do you go about doing a stay interview? Should it be the CEO doing it? Should it be their manager? What does that look like?
it should be the decision maker. So if it's the manager that would make the decision of fire or hire someone else, um, then that should be the person doing it. Not necessarily the person with the best relationship with that person, not necessarily, right? So it's like it's how they're tied to their future outcome or how that person is tied to this person's future outcome. And when you have those conversations, it's really about transparency and being very candid about where you see the business going, where you see them within the business, potential issues, great things, and it shouldn't be an option to have those conversations. This should be like a way that you kind of build relationships. It's the exact same way as like if there's a problem in your relationship and you kind of brush it under the rug, or someone just doesn't feel like talking about it, and then it gets get build up and build up and build up.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually it will break. It might seem okay for now. I make it a point of making sure that, I know where everyone on my team wants to be. I'm never surprised if somebody leaves the company, never surprised even where they go. It's a matter of uh doing those check-ins consistently. If people are on the team are saying like, hey, inflation or I can't afford to live, we need to figure out how the current system is working, make sure that that doesn't break. Because if we bring in other people at the same rate or more or less, it's, you're just putting more into a broken system, right? So I would always recommend doing that before you even think about hiring. Can someone else on my team take on some of these things? Do I have the right people? If I was to rehire my whole team again, would I do that? Have those hard conversations with myself and my team, and then figure out what is the ROI on certain jobs. Every job should have an outcome, even chief of staff, even engineers. Like there is or you can tie a revenue to those particular jobs, and then have a good understanding of like, if I hire this person at X dollars, will I be able to 3 or 4x our money and revenue? And does it make sense to make this higher? Right? You might have some pain at the front where you're not 3xing, but eventually, right, they should 3, 4x their salary or more. So it's kind of like the process you have to go through.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's never easy, and so we're constantly trying to get it right. And sure, who knows what's the signal in a candidate the thing that you've come to really trust, but almost no one else screens for? Are there certain like signals or like a signal that you're like, this is the key signal?
I mean, I've never seen anyone ever let someone go for working too hard.
Yep, great point.
So that is
How do you
the,
screen for
the
that?
you kind of want to see like how they're showing up throughout the process. I mean, people can like oversell themselves, especially if they're good at that kind of thing. But you want to check references. I know some people say don't check references. Like, I really believe, like, why not check references?
We do reference checks in
Um,
every candidate at Shore, always. I'm
100%.
shocked, by the way, with the number of people who don't do reference checks because obviously we have former teammates and we never get calls on a reference check on them. And I'm like, how have you never called us for a reference check on these people? It's shocking to me. But
Yeah. There are a few questions that you need to ask in reference checks. It's like, would you rehire this person? I'm hiring for this role. What do you think? Why do you think that they would be a good fit for this role, or why not? And what did they do while they were working there that surprised you? Like, those are kind of like three things that are the basis for confirming. It even helps the candidate identify, like, is this the right role for them? And helps the company identify, if you do references, how can I get the most out of this person, right? Now is kind of like going on a bit of a tangent there in references, but
is there a signal that fooled you early in your career that like you've learned to discount now?
sometimes skills are like overrated. Like, a lot of skills can be learned if you have the right attitude, you work hard, like, have the grit, and you have trust. Like, I just don't hire anyone that I don't think I can trust. Obviously, trust is earned over time. It's earned. The candidate needs to earn trust from the employer, just the same as, but relationships not built on trust typically crumble. Um, and so I think that I kind of overrated skills. Oh, this person, like, they worked at this company before, which is a similar company. They must be successful, right? And that's not always the case. So you have to dig into that a little more. I can go on about that, but sort of like the short.
Yeah, I mean, people have success at other companies and they kind of say it's because of them, but maybe just kind of like, hey, you got lucky, you joined Facebook early on, and Facebook grew faster than any other company in history almost. And it's like, does that mean because you were great or because you joined a rocket ship? Now that helps your career a ton, but it doesn't mean you're going to replicate building a rocket ship again.
Exactly. Was it the logo, or was it like the person? It was like who they had around them, what part of the projects did they touch, right? All those things.
Is there a signal too? I mean, a lot of people say, I mean, we've talked a bunch about sort of interviewing, and it sounds like you are kind of pro interviewing, but I feel like a lot of people say the interview is usually worthless because you might hire someone because like, oh, they're personable. I like them. I get along with them on a call, on like an interview. And it has almost no, I think the data in some cases shows that it has almost no indication of long-term success. So is that true? Or like, are
I think that's false. I think it's like poor interviewing or bias. A lot of people just may have bias.
everyone has a bias, right? Someone shows up, they dress a certain way, they speak a certain way, they went to a certain school, so like there's always we can't help but not have biases.
Yeah, it's just like like, objectively need to kind of remove those, and then I tie it back to dating too, right? It's not like you need to date someone, and then interviewing is very similar, right? Like, I don't think you need to do. The data shows that you don't need to do more than 3 interviews to make a really good decision, but you need to meet with people, deeply, see how they show up, right? Most of the problem, honestly, is that when people interview, they're not transparent about what it's like to work there, or the candidate's not
Mm.
transparent. And so you basically have two people that aren't being fully transparent about the issue, and that's where things don't work out. So if you dig into things and be extremely serious about the outcomes that are expected on both sides, then you can interview really well within 3 interviews.
Yeah. All right. That's a great point. And it's sort of going back to the dating point, it's sort of like lying about your height on a dating profile, and or someone, or on the other flip side, someone being very honest, maybe, look, I want to have baby, I want to have kids, and I want to start a family. And if you don't feel that way, and that's maybe not the right person for you. Is there, given you like interviews, is there a single best interview question that you've used or you've heard found like the best founders use, like in a founder interviewing might be a little bit different than you as a recruiter interview. Is there an interview question you think founders should always ask?
I think you need to ask a lot of questions and be super curious, and also like balance it, and not the way that, like, you're the only person asking questions. You should allow it to be sort of like a 50-50 approach to
Mm.
interviewing. So I would start with that. I don't think that there's one interview question that kills all interview questions. But depending on the role, if you go deep and say, hey, what is one thing you want to be known for, right? You can kind of understand, you know, where that person is going to be. Are they going to show up? Like, depending on their answer and what you're looking for, and what they've told you so far, maybe you can create a really good understanding. The other thing is, what's one thing that you think I'll learn about you when you start working here? What has worked out for you in the past really well or hasn't worked out, right? In one of your jobs, right? So just it's about alignment. Great hiring is just all about alignment. It's like the right things match up.
I totally agree. Is there it feels like there's a generational shift happening sometimes with candidates, like on what they value at work today. Are there things that founders haven't really caught on to yet that you're like, yeah, you need to pay attention to this generational shift or this mental shift?
Definitely, I mean, it's flexibility, is the number one people that they're looking for because people are just more independent than they were before. They have, more access than they did before to learning to anything. People want immediate gratification typically, right? And so, people aren't in a position, well, high performers aren't in a position to grow or get raises or, whatever's important to them, it can change. And the company is not aware of that, that's where things tend to fall. I mean, we talked about it, which is remote, right? So a lot of people are just looking for more flexibility, depending on their lifestyle. If you have teenagers, then you probably maybe want to be out of the house and you want to be at work. If you have young kids, then you want to be home as much as possible, right? If you live in a remote city. So like there's all these factors that kind of drive. And what's really cool, I think, is that when people hire correctly, they have options. And when candidates approach job search and finding the right role or career trajectory in the right way, they've got endless options. Like there is a right place for each person or a right person for each place.
Agreed. Is there a belief you
Yeah.
held 10 years ago about running a business, like being an entrepreneur yourself, that you've abandoned, or like sort of just a belief you thought was true and no longer do?
I mean, probably like it takes money to make money.
Mhm.
uh, I find that it's not all about throwing like you could throw money at a problem, sure, and in some cases it's not a terrible idea, but you need to be very financially savvy and you can't just pour money and expect you're going to get a return.
I totally agree. It's funny. I've had a debate with one of my teammates about this, and he's like, "Oh, we need to be spending more money on things." I'm like, look, I'm not going to take investment or spend more money and waste money until I feel confident. Like, I'm not going to sit around and just save money, and I'll make a lot of tests, but I'm not going to go just throw a huge amount of cash into anything until I feel confident about it having a return, just for the sake of spending that cash. And it's funny how some people don't understand that mentality sometimes. And it's sort of fiscally prudent, but willing to take bets and risks when you do is like, I think a smart way to be as a founder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most people start businesses with no money, right? And they get scrappy and that's what makes them successful. So why would you follow another saying that's complete opposite?
Correct.
If you have the will, you will make it happen.
Yeah, that's right. Hard work, as you said, one of the key signals. Is there a single piece of advice, if you could break it all down, all your 20 plus years of experience, the people you've hired, the companies you've worked with, worked for, built, is there a single piece of advice you would give to folks for being an excellent entrepreneur?
I think it's focus, and it's something that I like learned more recently. Unfocused attention on where the business needs to be is like the biggest business killer. I don't want to say that I have all the answers. There are thousands of entrepreneurs that are widely successful, and everybody that's successful finds a way to be successful. But I just find that focusing on one core thing, and how you work on your business. If you put all your effort and time into that one thing, it's better than spreading it across multiple things, right? Which is what I did at the beginning of starting the business because I thought, oh, we need to do this, or we need to offer this pricing, or we need to, be this dancing circus in order to properly serve customers, and that served our customers very well.
No, focus is so key. In this sort of something we talk about a lot at Chore and for our team and everything else is like, and for founders, right? We talk about this, like, how do you focus on the key things you need to get done and remove all the other distractions? If you look at the world's best entrepreneurs, every single one of them is laser focused on that like big picture thing they're trying to do and not on all one taking the small little things that are distracting, but make you feel good. And so, yeah, I think focus is a great way to end. Adam, how can folks find you, get in touch, learn more about you, hire you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, thanks again so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've learned so much, from you. And I really appreciate this. Most of my handles are Recruiter Adam, so you can go to recruiteradam.com. I'm Recruiter Adam on Twitter and Instagram. And then our website is linkisgroup.com. It's kind of like link and us put it together, linking people together. And so LinkedIn obviously is where I spend most of my time. So on LinkedIn as well.
Amazing. Adam, your time is precious. Thank you so much for spending some of it with me and our audience. I appreciate you.
Thanks a lot. I'm excited for you and hope everyone, has a great time building.